Galtung's triangle is a very important model in international relations and global politics created by Johann Galtung, hence the name, as it really helps to understand how violent conflict arises and its connection to non-violent conflict. And really, I find it a very convenient way to explain current situations in emerging conflicts and predict possible future deteriorations, so it is a must in any peace builder's toolkit and for anyone with an exam on global politics. Now, Galtung's triangle is divided into two main areas or levels in which conflict can be analyzed, which are divided by this line. The upper, or manifest level, shows immediate and obvious signs of violent conflict, so we can think of it as the evidence. This evidence can often be counted, for example with the amount of villagers lost in a raid. The lower level represents the latent level of conflict. Here, rather than looking at how the conflict manifests, like a raid, we are looking at the causes behind that conflict, why that raid took place, and how different elements affected it. For example, let's imagine conflict is like growing this piece of wheat, where the wheat represents violent conflict. A manifest level of analysis, the top of the triangle, would look at the growth of the wheat itself. Casualties, damage, verbal violence, we would look at them increase as the conflict or the wheat grows. However, a latent level of analysis, meaning the bottom of the triangle, would look at the reasons behind the conflict, or why the wheat is growing. We would look at nearby water sources, amount of light, or if I got tired of waiting and simply used a bone meal to grow the wheat. All of these are different elements that affect the wheat differently, and if we want to achieve peace, we must learn to take them all into account, not just look at the manifest level of wheat growing, as even if we could somehow degrow the wheat, if we don't change its access to water or sunlight, then it will simply grow back eventually. And this is where Galtung's triangle really shines, as it not only gives an overview of conflict at both its latent and manifest levels, but each vertex of the triangle represents a different factor in said conflict. The first vertex on the latent level represents attitudes and assumptions, which includes discriminatory attitudes like racism or things like victimhood or trauma. For example, villagers may be wary of pillagers because of their skin, which turns pillagers into outcasts vying for revenge, eventually resulting in a raid. The villagers didn't start the raid, but their attitudes and assumptions led to it. The second vertex on the latent level refers to contradictions. Here, we see things like inequalities in wealth or access to public services, or disputes over territory or resources that people believe are unevenly split. Once again, if villagers are much richer than pillagers, and mistreat them structurally by limiting their access to things like education or healthcare, the pillagers will resent them, which may lead to a raid in the future. The villagers, once again, didn't start the raid, but their contradictions in who gets what and what you're entitled to led to it. Lastly, we have the only vertex on the manifest level of conflict, which refers to behaviors. Here we would include discriminatory acts, insurgency attacks, and violence. These would be the pillagers getting fed up with the villagers, organizing and starting a raid. See, however, that for the behaviors to arise, there is a need for both attitudes/assumptions and contradictions to have previously existed, as otherwise the triangle wouldn't sustain itself. So, we can conclude that using the model of Galtung's triangle, in order to stop the conflict, it won't be enough to place an iron golem to scare off the pillagers and keep them at bay. But the roots of the conflict, its latent level, whatever it is, must also be addressed, as otherwise you're not solving the problem, but delaying it and letting it grow worse. Galtung's triangle is personally one of my favorite models in global politics, simply because of how useful it is with anything relating to conflict and how relatively easy it is to learn. You can just remember your A, B, C's. However, in trying to summarize this model in a short, lighthearted and enjoyable way, I may have made a mistake or missed a few things, so please feel free to add them in the comments. Discussing global politics, particularly its theoretical base, is always a pleasure.